Hello, everybody. Welcome to a new More Layers. I'm Seth Mariano.
And I'm Jordan Smith, and welcome to season 3 of our kind of review. We're just talking about the show Arthur. If you're new here, Seth and I, a little while back, agreed that we're mostly going to stick to talking about TV shows and films. And our last mini-series that we did centered around SpongeBob, a series that we both love to quote, especially with our friends. And over the past few weeks, we've covered the first 2 seasons of Arthur, so today we start season 3.
Yeah, and season 3 is probably the shortest up to the date of it anyway. I mean, the past couple seasons were I think 30, 20 episode slots apiece, but this has apparently only a total of 15. Anyway. The season 3 begins with Buster's back, kind of a continuation of the story that continued the previous season of, Buster traveling with his divorced dad around places. But to kick off the 3rd season, Buster is finally coming home, and Arthur is thrilled, at least at first. But he imagines then how much his travels may have changed him. And so, hoping to kind of maintain the friendship or whatever, he's doing extensive research on places he's been. And he's just hoping hoping that's enough to kind of keep the friendship going.
Yeah, this is one of the handful of times where they'll continue a story from a previous episode. Most of the time, the episodes that they have are self-contained, meaning that they're not really connected to anything in particular. And maybe every once in a while, a previous episode is referenced, but not necessarily a continuation of that story. Whereas here, as Seth said, this is after Buster left, and as I mentioned in the previous episode, having a friend move away or travel for a long period of time can be difficult because you're used to spending so much time with them. And then all of a sudden it just stops. Now, granted, as this episode implies, he does come back, but Arthur, in his traditional imagination, starts to picture, is Buster going to be different? Is he going to be too sophisticated to be hanging out with his old friends, since there's a good chance he's different with all the different places he traveled to?
Yeah, I feel it's easy for me for from my experience with maybe a friend or two, even ones probably that I haven't been able to get to know that well or long, thinking, well, have they moved on? Are they they too cool to want to come back again or whatever? But for the most part, they have kind of come back to me. They've been in contact with me, but yeah, it's just one of Arthur's natural anxieties, I think.
Yeah, and it's honestly, especially at that age, very justifiable, because who knows if people are going to find things in places that they like and even prefer when they travel that much.
Yeah.
And then part 2 of episode 1, if you will, is also kind of a continuation of this story called The Ballad of Buster Baxter. Whereas Arthur was worried about Buster changing, Buster finds out that other things have changed while he was away.
Yeah, and this would probably be one of the more fun episodes for the parents, because it's narrated by the living folk legend Art Garfunkel of Simon and Garfunkel.
That I did not know.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah. It's kind of funny. Not long ago, my dad was playing on his phone their song Scarborough Fair.
Okay.
Because we were making some stuff with parsley and rosemary and stuff, like the stuff that they list in the song. But yeah, so I imagine if he saw it, it'd probably be one of his favorites.
Probably. And this goes along with a point that we sometimes address when this happens in the show. The show Arthur sometimes loves to throw in a celebrity guest appearance, whether they make a physical appearance or, in this case, narrate the story. And then one part of this overarching story, I forget which episode it's technically in, but I remember a scene that is honestly really good at putting things in perspective, where Arthur's worried about losing his friend, and then somebody else tells him, try to look at it from Buster's perspective. You lose one friend, everything else stays the same for you. Whereas for him, he's losing all his friends, and he's put in a completely different scenario.
Yeah, he does kind of experience, well, Buster meaning, kind of a bit of a culture shock upon coming home. Like, he feels like he's missed out on some of the cool new movie culture, or like Arthur and the Brain, or continuing a book that the three of them started together or something. And, you know, he's trying to adjust back to the Elwood City life. It's a bit awkward, but the tension is kind of lightened a little bit because the Art Garfunkel character, you know, sings these kind of funny lines popping up on screen every once in a while.
Yeah, I love when they do that kind of thing.
Yeah, but in the end it works out, and for the most part nothing's really changed.
Yeah, of course there's that initial adjustment they gotta make, but they're still the same person they were when they were separated.
Yeah. And then the season continues with DW All Fired Up, in which DW has a fire drill at her preschool. But before that, because she's not familiar with the concept of it, she's naturally anxious and super determined to be ready, if not more than ready. And so she goes all out, you know, doing like these practice fire procedures, and she's like anxious about like flame going up in the house, and she's imagining they're going to light the school on fire. She has no real grasp on the concept until it actually happens, and she's probably, if I remember, a bit underwhelmed or disillusioned at the end.
Yeah, of course she's 4 years old, so her imagination is going to be just as crazy, if not more so, with Arthur's. She's initially terrified, which is kind of interesting considering in a previous episode we talked about she was a safety nut.
Yeah.
But now she's terrified of even a potential fire drill, not even an actual fire. And then, kind of ironically, by the end, when they actually do have a fire drill, she's the one keeping it together, where it's her rivals, if you will, the Tibble twins, that are freaking out.
Yeah. Just goes to show, even like the rowdy kids get scared sometimes.
Well, yeah, I've talked to doctors or people who give shots, and they say some of the biggest fraidy cats, if you will, are the big, tough, muscly people.
Oh, man. Yeah, and speaking of the Tibbles, the very next story is largely focused on them. Because DW, in a creative move, you could call it lying, deception, but it's her desperate effort to kind of keep the house in order, or while the Tibbles are being their usual rowdy selves in her house. And so she comes up sort of on the spot with a story, a made-up fictional heroine story about a fictionalized version of herself who's kind of a princess, action heroine hybrid. And the fun thing about it is, and what makes it one of the most entertaining stories in the series, is its creative callbacks to previous stories centered around DW.
That is true, because I think there was at least one where she had difficulty riding a bike and a few other things. There was one on the tip of my tongue, but I lost it. In any case, she starts doing this partly because of the rivalry that she has with these two, and how it just seems like somehow they are just better than her basically anything. Like, they're very competitive. So she gets this idea in her head that maybe she can try to learn how to read before they do. And as you mentioned, she comes up with a story basically improv style, which is impressive at her age.
Yeah.
And it ultimately works in the end. She doesn't face any repercussions for this, because after she's done reading, she closes the book, they bring it back with them, and even though when they're... Is it mom? Grandmother?
Their grandma.
It was their grandmother, okay. She starts reading that same book, but it's a completely different story.
Yeah.
So it seems like for a second they're catching on, but then they're like, oh, it must be a magic book that changes stories every time you read it. So this is one of the few times where DW comes up with a less than honest plan, but ultimately gets away with it.
Yeah. And it's probably fun for a lot of the fans who know the series that well up to that point. Basically a lot of, again, references to earlier stories like The Wedding Ring or The Spinach, The Snowball, The Crazy Bus. It's all in there. It's kind of like, almost like a DW highlight reel in the form of an episodic little hero saga.
Yeah, it was the Wedding Ring one I was trying to think of, so thank you for that.
Yeah.
And I like how the episode basically says, yeah, we know that the audience knows that she's making this up as she goes.
Yeah.
So they gave a bunch of visuals as she's telling the story, where the bad guys were played by her brother and Buster.
Oh, yes, yeah. And at one point they even had Buster as like a transformer.
He was some type of mech android or something, and then Arthur was transforming into some weird robotic stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, if Arthur's in the story, he's got to be a villain.
Oh yeah, it's the whole sibling rivalry. They supposedly don't like each other thing, but
right.
As we see in previous and I'm sure future episodes, they do care for each other. They just like to take a jab whenever they can.
Yeah. But then we continue on with Arthur Goes Crosswire, in which Arthur and his rich classmate Muffy Crosswire are paired up for an animal research project. And while they're researching, they actually run into the actor who plays Arthur's favorite TV superhero, Bionic Bunny, which is kind of the Batman of their universe. Yeah.
I would argue that he's more like Superman, because they do have a darker version of him.
Yeah. You're probably right, yeah.
In any case, it's still very close to the DC superhero trope.
Yeah. I'd say, well then, I guess whether it's because Arthur has just helped this famous actor, he starts to get a little bit full of himself or carried away. And it's only when others start imitating him that he snaps out of it and kind of becomes himself again.
Yeah, I think that this is the episode that I'm thinking of where he starts to speak like she does, and then somebody goes, guys, I think he's gone haywire. Or should I say, crosswire.
Ah.
And then this kind of makes me think of the episode of SpongeBob that aired much later in the years, where it's revealed that SpongeBob is just really good at impersonating other people, but he does it so much to the point that he forgets who he really is. So it takes other people impersonating him to bring him back to reality, kind of like how they did here.
Yeah, to kind of give him a look in the mirror.
And of course it works. He comes back to his normal self. I don't remember how Muffy responds to this, but
Yeah, I kind of like to guess she's disappointed.
yeah, probably, because she likes to have everything go her way, especially since she's a spoiled rich brat. But yeah, ultimately, as as his friends express, it's good to have him back.
Yeah. But then that's immediately followed up with a story about another school team project, interestingly, specifically titled Sue Ellen and the Brainosaurus. And I'm guessing, from the first sentence in the description, this is supposed to be like the same project assignment time period as the previous story. Well, anyway, Sue Ellen and the Brain are paired up as a team. But the Brain is a bit anxious about how it's going to turn out because he feels she doesn't know as much about actual dinosaurs, which is what they're building, as he does. So he thinks it's probably going to be a disaster, it's going to be sissy, or something he's really, really anxious about.
Yeah, this is kind of the opposite problem I typically see with group projects, where usually there's one person who doesn't want to do much work at all, and it kind of brings everybody else down to some degree. But here, he wants to do literally everything.
Yeah.
And as a result, she kind of feels left out. She doesn't feel like she's not really contributing anything. So she tries to form an agreement where she at least can work on the head of a skeleton dinosaur that they're putting together. And I remember this moment particularly because in a montage where she is trying to sculpt a head, there's a brief shot of the head looking like Barney.
Oh, now that sounds like a disaster.
Well, it's a funny little reference to another show altogether, for sure. I remember my sister and I getting a giggle out of it.
Ugh.
But, a nice little callback, and at that point she is trying to contribute. And even when she presents what she did to him, he's like, no, it's all wrong.
Yeah. He's pretty much a level up from arguably all the other kids in the class, so he's naturally, I guess, not very trusting.
Well, he doesn't want his supposed perfect grade or something to be ruined.
Oh, no.
Eventually, their squabble leads them to dropping and breaking the skeleton, which at first seems like a disaster, but then they turn it into a clever idea, or they turn it into like a bone
Dig site exhibit.
Dig site, there we go. That's a better term. And it really works out for them because that was the first time they really worked together.
Yeah. And probably two of the things that I remember the most are the Brain's paranoid fantasies of like how Mr. Ratburn's going to react. The first one being like, unfortunately, this is not cooking class. You fail. And then another one is, I'm afraid you're going to be in the third or whatever it is, fourth grade a long time.
I feel like at least one of the ideas he had was picturing her like putting long hair and other feminine touches on the dinosaur.
Oh. Yeah.
But of course, that's just his imagination blowing things out of proportion.
Yeah. And then, interestingly, we have a third consecutive story involving a school research project, but for a little bit of a change of pace, it's a different type. It's about ancestral history this time. And in this story titled Background Blues, everyone's assigned the task of looking up about their family history, which I have a personal memory of, having to do that, write about one ancestor of my own twice. And I don't know if I really found anything that much interesting, but I did enough though.
Yeah, I did something similar growing up. I know at least once or twice I would talk about my grandfather on my dad's side who served in World War II. So I would kind of talk about him and then talk about the war itself. In terms of looking up family history beyond that, I don't know too much offhand, but I seem to recall at one point finding out that I was possibly related to Henry Hudson.
Oh,
I could easily be misremembering that.
ah, okay, yeah,
All I know is, as firm Christian believers, I would say that technically, in some capacity, we're all related to each other since we were all born from two people.
true, yeah, yeah. I wrote twice about the same person in my family. I can't remember that much except he was like a German immigrant and his son was in the Revolutionary War. That's about it, but
Okay. I mean, that's definitely something, and there's probably more out there that we don't know.
yeah. I do know that I'm like very much like European Mediterranean DNA. So yeah, okay, because I got the I think it was the Christmas I debuted in Artist Unlimited that I got my DNA test kit and I eventually used it and found out that I am pretty much as white as I look.
And there's no shame in that.
No. Yeah, did you ever do one of those test kits?
I have not. I know a few people who have, but I myself never did. I know for sure that I've got a good chunk of Italian. And then I believe, based on some school projects I did as a kid, I also had some Irish and maybe some Swedish.
Oh, all right, cool.
Something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we have, which is probably the most self-referential Arthur story to this date, and it's titled "And Now Let's Talk to Some Kids," and it's centered around the class, Arthur and his class, being shot for a segment on a kids show called The Magic Toolbox, and basically it's kind of an interview or basically educational discussion sort of segment that seems to take inspiration from the Arthur series' own interstitial A Word From Us Kids.
Yeah, for those that have not seen Arthur before, between each 15-minute story, they have a live-action segment where they actually do go into different schools and places and talk to some kids.
Yeah.
Usually somehow connecting to the episode you just saw.
Yeah. Yeah. And so most everybody in the class is excited, and they finally the cameras roll and they kind of fumble a little bit, but they give it a shot.
Yeah, once again, not to try and connect it to SpongeBob too much, it reminds me of the Sponge Who Could Fly when somebody's going around interviewing the different residents, and there was one random kid that gets interviewed and he's like, he helps people, and he flies, and he helps people.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, the excitement is there, but then once the camera's put in front of them, they're just like, oh no.
Oh, where are we?
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
And I guess it aired.
Yeah.
It was good enough for
It was good enough.
for the people interviewing them.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a moment at the end of the episode
Yeah.
where it shows them watching it actually on TV.
Yeah, Arthur and Francine, like, in the future as, like, old people.
Oh, that part I don't remember.
Yeah.
It has been a little while.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And then we have a sort of two-parter in two separate acts, beginning with the chips are down. Which basically is kind of set up by a ridiculously irrational setup because, Arthur and Buster are organizing potato chips by appearance while it's raining outside. And DW's like, I want a chip, and they're like, not yet, we're sorting them. And I'm like, what's the big deal? Why can't you just give her one? But I digress. Anyway, she sneaks one that is green, like about as green as the grass. And then, when Arthur and Buster realize it's disappeared, they figure, DW stole it. And they try to taunt her by having a fake conversation about them being toxic, the green chips.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it starts to work because she starts thinking, I just ate a poisonous chip, I'm going to die. And what makes it worse is that the story kind of gets publicized and her mom starts telling other people about it. Even when she promises to not talk about it with anyone anymore, she still does. And DW kind of goes into that trope where she's so embarrassed that she wears a football helmet in public.
Yeah.
And eventually, not only is she terrified, but so is Binky.
Yeah, because apparently he ate one himself.
Which kind of leads into part 2, Revenge of the Chip.
Yeah.
Where they're both freaking out, and then it turns out it's all a hoax. And they participate in this live broadcast of a show or something.
Yeah, it's basically a spoof of Kids Say the Darndest Things.
Where instead of that, it's...
You do the most embarrassing things.
Mm-hmm. So the announcer leads off by saying, a kid who ate a green chip and thought it was deadly. So DW freaks out, but it turns out it's Binky.
Yeah. Yeah. A really nice thing about this story is, even though Binky is one of Arthur's classmates, and he probably didn't know DW that well before, they really connect really well with each other on an equal level. They're like Binky doesn't look down on Arthur on DW, and DW likewise sees him as a pretty decent guy, and they really form a nice friendship.
And what's really nice about it is that it isn't just a one-time thing.
Yeah.
They actually connect in multiple episodes. Like there's one where he's teaching her how to dance, particularly with ballet. And then, while there isn't a direct interaction here, the episode where Arthur infamously punches his sister leads eventually to Binky punching him because he was basically
pressured into doing it
by his friends.
Yeah.
So after Arthur gets punched, he goes up to Binky later and says, I actually want to thank you because you doing that made me realize how it made her feel.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And, of course, this is one of those probably umpteen times when DW naturally, she gets so upset, she blames it all on Arthur, even if she has no evidence that he really did anything. When the story breaks and she's embarrassed.
Yeah, which, at least at face value, can be kind of frustrating when this happens time and time again. But then, I gotta remind myself she's only 4 years old, and even Arthur, he's only probably about 8, 9 years old. So neither of them are that old, they haven't really matured yet, so this type of thing is bound to happen repeatedly.
Yeah, and I'm probably gonna play... I guess this is playing devil's advocate a little bit here. I mean, Arthur kind of has a track record of having a low patience with DW or being a little unnecessarily harsh to her at times. So, and even when DW begs for his help in this story, right, you can see he's weighing the consequences of saying yes and no. He's basically coming to the conclusion that, if I don't help her like she wants, she's just gonna keep screaming and screaming and screaming until she gets what she wants.
Which ultimately is not a good tactic to use when you're raising a child, which we see a lot with shows like Caillou, but here, it's like, it's not technically Arthur's responsibility. Like, yeah, he should be a good influence on his younger sister, but when it comes to teaching her good morals and things along this nature, a lot of that is the responsibility of the parents.
Yeah. Well, anyway, next we have what some would call a story of coincidence, Binky Rules. When the janitor at school finds some graffiti on the wall that literally says the words Binky Rules, so naturally he assumes Binky Barnes, the kid at school in Arthur's class, is the one responsible for doing this. But Binky is innocent and he insists on it, and so Buster and Fern set out to prove his innocence.
And it turns out that this whole thing was done as a publicity stunt by a new band that happens to be called Binky, hence the confusion. And I just remember loving the intro to this episode, because Arthur addresses the audience like he normally does, and he goes, "Today we're going to talk about Binky." And every time he says that, his friend Binky pops up into frame, and he's like, "No, not that Binky."
Yeah, that's what they do in episode B. Yeah, the cold open for part 1 is kind of goofy because it's pretty much, and it kind of runs through the story of kind of the heated rivalry between Buster and Fern, who are two sort of impromptu detectives, and their styles are clashing, and you kind of see that running throughout the episode proper.
And I will say, as much as I understand a band wants to get their name out there, and sometimes a publicity stunt is the route to go, the fact is they technically committed vandalism by doing this graffiti stuff. And what makes it even crazier is later on in the episode, when they are invited to meet the band backstage, it turns out they're not even real.
Yeah. Technically, they're holograms.
Which is kind of ahead of its time, especially given the stuff centered around AI in today's modern world. But even then, it's like, apparently it was going to be revealed that night, and they just found out a little bit earlier than everybody else. But it's like, why would somebody do this?
Yeah. But, it's interesting. I feel like this is probably more for the parents. The band itself is kind of basically a sort of Finnish folk popish band. It's very reminiscent of ABBA.
Yeah, and I would also say that it could be a somewhat subtle reference to the popular Japanese character Hatsune Miku, who everybody knows is a hologram of sorts, and yet they still go to her performances.
Yeah. And Meet Binky is about the band playing a local concert, and Arthur initially feeling like he's going to miss out because he's got a seat assigned to him way in the back. And at one point, he even imagines himself at the concert getting to meet them and going toward the stage, but it takes him literally 3 years to actually get there.
I love that visual gag. It's like, he doesn't get any older in his imagination, I don't
No,
think. But Buster
no,
comes up to him and is like, "Oh, the concert ended years ago. We're in the 6th grade now. Here's all the homework you missed."
yeah, yeah, a whole wheelbarrow load of it.
I love the creativity they have when it comes to using his imagination for visual gags.
Yeah, yeah. And then this is probably one of the most relatable stories. Arthur rides the bandwagon, which centers around a line of toys that kind of move on their own, and they talk and they stretch and stuff, that are called Woogles, which Arthur initially sees as unappealing, but then seeing how pretty much everybody in his class has one, and he desperately wants one himself.
Yeah, this definitely is a reference to how in the real world, even now, there's always going to be something that explodes in popularity for a short amount of time, but as quickly as it gets popular, it dies out. And it's showcased in this episode because, everybody's got the Woogles, and Arthur goes so far as to make a fake one, which does not work.
Or buy a fake one, which they switch out the Woogles with in the store window.
Oh, that's true. He didn't actually make it. He bought an off-brand one called a Poogle, I think it was.
Yeah.
Um, so he tries to pass it off as an actual one. Nobody buys it. And he gets frustrated. But eventually, this is the part I don't like. Because around the time his grandmother gets one, he's already grabbed a bunch of his friend's attention with the clicking sound of a juice cap.
Yeah.
So, around the time that happens, his grandmother actually gets him one as a gift. Like, he actually has a Woogle now. But in a split second, he's like, "Oh, thanks," but now juice caps are the big thing. It's like, even if I was aware of that, I would still have at least said thank you, and then at least put it somewhere where it looks like I'll use it every once in a while, and not just immediately toss it to the side.
Yeah, I probably would have held on to it. I keep like every greeting card I get, like every little note, farewell note or whatever. I don't care. I'm keeping it.
Oh yeah, I'm very much the same way. Birthday cards, Christmas cards, what have you.
Yeah. They'll probably be in there for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And then we've got Dad's dessert dilemma, in which the class has a birthday party to celebrate the birth of the legendary scientist Galileo. You may know him as the guy who dropped 2 balls from the Tower of Pisa to do some research on gravity, for those who don't know. And the big hit food item ends up being something Arthur's dad made himself, that Arthur initially sees as a disaster waiting to happen, but is pleasantly surprised in how much Mr. Ratburn loves it.
And it's kind of a strange thing, because based on what I remember, his dad loved to try really obscure things when making dessert. And I say this is kind of strange because it's known throughout multiple episodes that he caters a lot of events, so he's like a good chef. He makes a lot of food. So it would be kind of interesting to see Arthur be concerned that something he makes isn't good.
Yeah, well, he was expecting to, or planning to do something a little more minimalist, but then he finds this whole towering Tower of Pisa cake, sitting there and thinking, I didn't want to do that. But it does, from my memory, look pretty good, though.
And it makes me think of another episode where Arthur and Buster try to make something without his dad's help.
Yeah.
And through a couple accidents, they end up making something else, but it's still really good.
Right, yeah.
And I think that's the episode that had Ming Tsai as a guest appearance.
Ming Tsai, yes. Yes. Yeah. And I was kind of thinking back, and I was talking about this with a friend of mine last night about how at a mutual friend's movie night, like, we have a friend who will host movie nights like on a monthly basis or so. And sometimes, or oftentimes, people will bring some homemade stuff. And one time somebody made cupcakes with the color of each Hogwarts house inside each one as a filling.
I believe the colors were red, yellow, green, and blue?
Something like, yeah, I believe they were.
Okay, because I know about the houses. I even remember their names. I just couldn't remember what color went to which house.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, red is Gryffindor, green Slytherin, no, blue would be Ravenclaw, though I think it's technically purple, and yellow would be Hufflepuff, though I think it's really orange, but it's close enough.
Yeah, it's a close color. They're near each other on the color wheel, so yeah.
Yeah. But as that story of Dad's Dessert Dilemma continues, Arthur's kind of like taking full advantage of the good press, if you will, that he's getting from this really good cake, and kind of commissions his dad to do some more for some more events. But as a consequence, Mr. Reed is like falling behind on actual work, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's an example of too much of a good thing or taking advantage of somebody else's skills and abilities.
Yeah. A bit exploitative, arguably, but they do, Arthur and DW do help him in the end, though.
It's a good example of what happens when you let attention and popularity go to your head.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we have the story of Popular Girls, in which Francine unintentionally stumbles upon a girls' magazine belonging to her older sister, whom is in high school. And a couple of the girls at school take a personality quiz and decide to pretty much change themselves 180 to be more interesting or more likable. So Sue Ellen becomes a bit mousy compared to usual, and Fern becomes a bit more outspoken, a bit more aggressive.
It's a classic episode moral where the concept is to just be yourself, because they try too hard to be liked by other people, especially after reading this magazine. But after doing so, instead of drawing people in, they turn people away.
Yeah. 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 And then, probably one of the most memorable ones for me, Buster's Growing Grudge. And this is kind of an interesting, maybe, case study, because it shows Buster getting so full of himself, frankly, somewhat narcissistic, pretty much from the beginning until just before the resolution. Because it starts off with Buster not putting any work at all into his research assignment that he has to do. Just basically just sitting around watching TV, goofing off all the time. And then, when it comes time, the due date for the actual presentation, he's got pretty much nothing prepared except a joke to kind of butter him up, he thinks. But before he can use it, Binky throws it in at the end of his own presentation, which infuriates Buster so much that he cannot stop thinking about it.
Yeah, there's a few things going on here where one obviously being the whole thing with the joke, because he hinges so much on this joke that he's basically like, okay, when I tell this joke, the response will be the difference between passing and failing.
Yeah.
But then also with Binky using his joke, that happens in other shows as well, where somebody will have a great joke and either someone else will steal it, or the first person will tell it, nobody laughs, but then the second person tells it and everybody laughs.
Yeah.
And this does happen in the world of comedy as well, where it's very suspect, or quite apparent even, when a comedian will basically take somebody else's joke and slightly reword it to make it look like their own.
Yeah, and I think that was even a storyline in the first episode of The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, which I saw.
Oh.
Somebody I think it was like a Bob Newhart routine that they say apparently either he stole or someone stole from him. I can't remember, but
yeah, I haven't seen that one, so I'll have to take your word for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I haven't really watched any of the show beyond that episode. I mean, I have seen the actress in the recent Superman movie because she played Lois Lane.
Oh.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, she also played Mrs. Maisel.
Did she play Lois Lane in like this newest
Yeah,
Superman
the new
movie,
one, yeah.
or in like the Henry Cavill Superman movies?
Oh yeah, the new one that
Okay.
came out more recently.
Gotcha.
Yeah, well anyway. And so Buster is so consumed with bitterness. He's got this idea that, if I vent about it on stage at the talent show, maybe I can win and even the playing field. Which is ridiculous. Again, so narcissistic. And he is super surprised that it doesn't play out that way. He's like, I can't believe I didn't win. Because, in his mind, it's comedy, but there's no real jokes in it.
And getting revenge on top of that is never a good idea.
Yeah. All he literally does is say, this Binky kid, nobody wants to say anything bad about him because they don't want to get pounded, but he basically took my joke and he got a better grade than I did, and that's just ridiculous, and that's pretty much about all he says.
And for whatever reason, it made me think of the line from Toy Story where Buzz is like, even though you tried to kill me, revenge is not something we promote on my planet. But we're not on my planet, are we?
Nope.
It's like, I could have definitely seen Buster have a similar interaction with Binky.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, but they do eventually make up, and everything's cool, as usual.
They usually patch things up at the end of the episode, and if they don't, then it's usually because it's a multiple-part story.
Yeah. And then we have Arthur's treasure hunt, in which Arthur digs in his own yard, hoping to find some treasure, after Buster finds a rare artifact in his own home.
Yeah, I believe it was like an arrowhead.
Yes, it was.
So Arthur now wants to find something. Maybe he'll get famous off of it. The problem is he'd be doing this in his own yard, which his mom doesn't want him to do.
Yeah, she at least didn't want him to dig up the front yard.
Right, so he tries to find something. I can't remember how this one gets resolved. This is one I'm a little less familiar with.
Yeah, he's just pretty much grounded.
Okay, yeah, that would make sense then.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. And then we have The Return of the King, not to be confused with the Lord of the Rings movie, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But the setting is pretty much essentially the same, you could argue, because it's all set at a field trip to a medieval fair. In a way, so it's kind of like the Renaissance festival that we have, like in our region. If you've ever been to that, I know I have.
Say that again?
The Renaissance fair?
I've been to one years ago. I've been meaning to go back when I find an opportunity.
Yeah. 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 And so they've got like at the centerpiece pretty much a sort of Excalibur in the stone thing, if you know the legend of Arthur and the Excalibur sword.
Yeah.
And Arthur's recurringly trying to pull it out and, of course, struggling. But eventually, he draws it out and gets a crown at the end.
Yeah, which gives them the perfect opportunity to make a King Arthur joke.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's literally the title of the book version of this story by Mark Brown, I think.
Oh, that I didn't know.
Yeah.
Like, I knew a lot of his books turned into episodes, but I wasn't aware that one was. And what makes this particular moment extra powerful is that up to this point, the various people in the class have basically been going up against their counterparts from another school, led by somebody who used to mentor Mr. Ratburn, which really opens your eyes, because this guy is even stricter than he is. So even though people see Mr. Ratburn as difficult, he's nothing compared to this dude.
Yeah, even the kids at the school look kind of intimidating. They're all like in dark uniform. They look like a class out of a like super strict, I don't want to stereotype or anything, but really strict prep school or something.
Something like that. And every time each student goes up against their counterpart, it doesn't end well for them. Like Buster, with how much he loves eating, he's still out-eaten by his competitor. Brain, you would think he couldn't be outmatched, but they end up kind of tricking him, because the questions they ask, you have to give an answer based on how they perceived it in medieval times. Like the question he gets asked is, what is at the center of the solar system? He, of course, says the sun. But they're like, oh, sorry, the correct answer is the Earth. It's like, wait, that's wrong. Well, maybe so, but that's not what they thought in medieval times.
Yeah.
So the fact that Arthur is the one who pulls off the sword after everybody, including Ratburn's mentor, couldn't do it, is like, oh, they finally win something, and it's arguably the biggest ceremonious event at the entire fair.
Well, yeah, he is kind of the hero.
After he pulls out the sword, the guy who's been spouting this riddle repeatedly, like, bows to him, and then they present him with a crown with a parade kind of thing going on.
Yeah. It's kind of funny, if you remember that one VeggieTales cartoon with a riddle challenge during the tournament. It's pretty much for the it's probably for the parents too. It's pretty much based on the classic Abbott and Costello Who's on First routine.
Yep, I remember that part vividly.
Yeah. And then this one is probably one of my favorites, probably just because it's pretty goofy, probably more than any reason. Attack of the Turbo Tibbles, in which the Tibbles are over at the Reed House, hanging with DW, and Arthur's bothered by the noise they're making, and so Mrs. Reed kind of takes him into the living room and kind of keeps him occupied with a video cassette. But then something goes awry with the VCR, and while DW goes and seeks help, the Tibble twins stumble upon essentially a sort of the Power Rangers of this universe. Yeah. And it's called the Terrific Turbo Trooper Toy T-Bot Team.
Yeah, that's definitely a mouthful, but props for alliteration.
Yeah, yeah. And basically, they're like so, if it's the right word, enamored with this TV show that they pretty much start living it, like wearing the uniforms, like face mask and all, and pretty much imitating all the crazy action and stuff they do.
And it gets so far that they picture their classmates, I don't even want to say friends here,
Yeah.
as like alien enemies. And they end up getting to the point where they throw a swing and hit DW in the face with it.
Yeah. Which leads to her requiring stitches, sadly.
And it's only at that point that they realize that, yeah, they royally screwed up.
Yeah. And I've mentioned this before, how, some people think of the infamous Big Hit episode and think about DW getting struck hard. That moment of DW getting hit with the swing probably scared me even more than that. I mean, even rewatching it later, it pretty much made me nervous, even though I know the outcome.
Yeah, I have to agree, particularly when the initial hit happens. Not only because, yeah, you see the impact, you hear the impact, followed by her just tearing up uncontrollably. But it's like, they even show the initial wind-up when he's about to throw it.
Yeah.
So as a kid, when he started to wind up, it's like, okay, I'm turning away, I can't watch.
Yeah. Yeah, it is pretty difficult to watch. But in a way, it's... they learn their lesson the hard way, and they sincerely apologize very emotionally, and they agree they're not going to watch that program anymore.
Yeah, it's one of the few times where they get themselves into trouble and are actually remorseful for it.
Yeah. And there's some pretty good comedy in it too. Like at one point, one of the twins is calling Emily out. You slurred the letters LMNLP together. And, of course, that's funny because he said L twice. But probably even funnier is the other twin trying to correct him. No, it's LMNRP. I just think that's so funny.
Oh, yeah, then they start getting into a tussle, and their teacher just happens to make a hand signal that they recognize from the show, which she isn't aware of, and they take that as, oh, she's making a hand signal, we have to listen to her.
Yeah. Even though it's pretty much the universal hand gesture for timeout, if you've watched a football game or something, you know what it is, but...
Yep.
And then we go on to DW tricks the Tooth Fairy, which is pretty self-explanatory, but anyway, the setup is DW wants this new toy item that she sees advertised on television, but she doesn't have enough money, and I guess she's probably spent up all her birthday cash already, and then she finds out about the whole tooth fairy concept and how she can get money for a lost tooth. And one of her teeth does eventually loosen itself. But it can't come out or whatever. No. So she takes a desperate measure and plants a fake tooth under her pillow. When Arthur catches on, he's anxious that it'll ruin any future tooth fairy visits that could happen, and so he sneaks in and with some money while she's sleeping. But DW, of course, is fully convinced that her plan worked.
Yeah, another instance where she gets away with her little plot, in this case because her brother feared for his future, essentially. I guess he's still at the point where he believes in the Tooth Fairy if he's going out of his way to pull this stunt. Yeah, she thinks her plan worked, and I think that's how the episode ends too, where she just parades off screen going, I tricked the Tooth Fairy.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think she even plots to do it again the next night.
Oh, that's true. And Arthur is like, oh no, what have I done?
Like, it never ends.
Nope.
Nope. Next, we have another Tibble story, Double Tibble Trouble. And taking the setup is one of the twins falls ill, and the other one is kind of trying to still have fun with him while this is happening, but it doesn't really work out, and he's kind of depressed, not as fun as he usually is, and DW and Emily's efforts to kind of pep him up are pretty much in vain.
Yeah, I've definitely been, at least in a similar role. Like, I don't have a twin brother, but there have been instances growing up where I was really hoping to hang out with somebody, whether it be family or friend, and at the last second, they can't come because they're sick, and that really bums me out.
Yeah.
So then I'm just left there thinking, well, what do I do now?
Yeah. And then, probably one of the most nostalgic among many fans of the series is the Arthur's Almost Live, Not Real Music Festival. Another mouthful there. But, and the whole setup is Arthur and Buster kind of having a little pretend game in the basement and imagining a series of music videos. At the bookend is a two-parter with original animation and an original tune and all that. The library card song, most fans probably remember.
Yep.
But then there are three other songs that basically compile scenes or shots from earlier Arthur episodes together, creatively, most of them.
Yeah, I don't remember too much about this episode either, but I definitely remember that song. In fact, by sheer coincidence, the other day, when I was talking to somebody, they just randomly started humming that. I'm like, oh, I recognize what that is.
Yeah. Yeah. It's if you've heard it, you may never forget it.
I will give props to them for trying to create their own music videos, because even when you have a lot of equipment, there's a lot of hoops you got to jump through to really make it stand out. So the fact they tried to do this at this age is impressive.
Yeah. And next we have What Scared Sue Ellen, which focuses on Sue Ellen's fear of the unseen source of a howling sound in the woods. And she can't figure out what it is, and so she gets some help from three friends to kind of figure out what's going on. And it turns out it's not like a mythical creature or some obscure animal or whatever that she might have thought, but it's just a dog.
Yeah, well, when it talked about, like, oh, what is this mysterious howling, I figure it's got to be a dog or a wolf or something to that effect.
Or a coyote.
Yeah, coyote could have been very plausible. Which you still don't want to necessarily run into, especially if they're wild.
No.
But still, again, this is another case of them being this young and blowing things out of proportion. But it's kind of admirable that her friends kind of join in to supposedly face whatever this creature is.
Yeah.
But it's okay to be scared of things.
Yeah.
Like, we all generally are afraid of something or someone.
Yeah.
Like, as I mentioned, I think even last week, I am afraid of bugs.
Yeah. Which is fair. Yeah. think this happens probably in a lot of kids' TV episodes, like something sounds or looks suspicious, and then they come head on with it, and it's not as bad as it seemed.
Yeah, a classic trope that might come to a lot of people's minds is a branch hitting the bedroom window at night.
Yeah. But then we have the story of Clarissa is Cracked, involving DW borrowing like a porcelain doll named Clarissa from her grandma, and she really enjoys it. But eventually, it gets like messy and it's severely damaged, and she tries to fix it herself. But ultimately, they leave it up to a professional who, interestingly, though it probably shouldn't be too much of a surprise considering his experience with puppetry and that kind of stuff, the repair person ends up being Mr. Ratburn.
Yeah, every once in a while, there's an episode or a scene in one where I am reminded that he's into puppets, because it's not touched upon too much. It just comes back every once in a while.
Yeah.
But I also got to question Grandma Thora here. It's like, yeah, this is your granddaughter and you're sharing something you love with her, but it's like, why would you trust something that fragile to a 4-year-old that you know has made some questionable choices?
Yeah, I guess that's a fair question.
Cartoon logic.
Yeah, sure. And then there's an episode that touches a little bit on insecurity or trying to be cool, Arthur's Dummy Disaster, which focuses on the anthropomorphic moose in Arthur's class, George, and his giraffe dummy, Wally, whom the other kids seem to find very entertaining and makes George feel really good about himself. But then the dummy starts falling apart, and George has sort of an identity crisis, thinking, man, is this the end of my cool streak?
Yeah, George is not often the central focus of an episode, but here he definitely is. And this is something that does happen a lot in real life, where somebody who's insecure or not too confident talking to other people will often turn to ventriloquism and communicate that way. So the fact that it's represented here is honestly pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
And I believe this is the first episode with Wally in it.
Might be.
But this certainly isn't the last, because I know there's at least one episode where George runs into someone with Asperger's syndrome who is initially terrified of the puppet.
Right, yeah. That's true. Yeah, I don't know. What are your thoughts on ventriloquist dummies? Are you big on them or anything?
I mean, I don't use them a lot myself, but I know several people who are, either personally or big ventriloquist names like Terry Fator or Jeff Dunham.
Yeah.
So I know it's a big deal, and I commend anyone who turns it into a career, because it's not as easy as it looks.
Oh, no. Yeah, they're fine. I can't say, I've had as much fun looking at them, but they seem pretty cool, though.
Oh, yeah. Some puppets, depending on the design, can be terrifying, for sure, but
sure, yeah.
Most of them, I think they're fine.
Yeah. Then we have a story titled Francine and the Feline, in which Francine's family gets a new cat, and who seems to gravitate more toward Francine than her sister Catherine. Things get pretty complicated or troubled when and Nemo, the cat's name, starts interacting with Arthur's dog, Pal. And Arthur is really not tolerant about this because he believes cats are generally violent. But this dog and cat, they seem to hit it off pretty well.
Yeah, some animals of different species won't always get along. In fact, sometimes animals of the same species don't get along. But this kind of throws a jab at the whole which is better, dogs or cats thing that people, even today, still kind of argue about. Like, I think dogs are better, I think cats are better, and this is why. When really, they're both fine, and as long as you train them well, they're not going to be too crazy. And the fact that it takes the animals getting along for the quote-unquote humans to get involved here really says something.
Yeah.
I say quote-unquote because they're obviously not human technically, but they're, as we discussed, anthropomorphic, meaning they have human-like features.
Yeah. And next we have Mom and Dad have a great big fight in which Arthur and DW witness a disagreement going on, and they probably don't have the context for it, but it really makes them concerned for their future, thinking their parents are either they're gonna split up or they're gonna leave them, and so they imagine having to kind of live on their own, take care of themselves, but they're not sure how to. And then they assume, after they have like another little exchange back and forth, that they're actually about to split, and so they go after them. But their dad assures them, "Oh no, I'm just making a run to the store. That's all."
Yeah, as weird as it sounds, though, I will say this episode I kind of relate to some degree. Because in the back of my mind, I don't think I ever really believed my parents would split. But as a young kid, I remember times where I would get scared anytime I saw or heard my parents arguing, especially over something, in hindsight, that would be trivial.
Oh, man.
And I think there was at least one instance where I went up to my mom, and again, I was young back then, where I would say, "Please don't leave, Dad."
Yeah. Yeah. And you even see that at one point in the scene, part of the movie Cheaper by the Dozen. You think, or one of the younger kids thinks, because the parents have had a very heated discussion, to put it more delicately, that she thinks they're going to split.
And I think there's a visual part of their imagination shown in this episode where they envision their parents sitting at opposite ends of a really long table where the kids are basically caught in the middle as they have to run back and forth and communicate between the parents what the other one said.
Yeah. Well, I don't remember that fantasy, but I do remember one fantasy about the three kids, Arthur, DW, and Kate, kind of living in their own home, like trying to cook, trying to clean, and it looks kind of like a little cabin, like in the middle of nowhere, and then they try dinner and they spit it out because they don't cook.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that because I think it ends with them just freaking out. It's like, what do we do? We're gonna starve.
Yeah, right. And then we have another episode that tends to tap a little into anxiety. We have DW's Perfect Wish, which focuses on DW turning 5. And and she's a bit anxious about it after her friend Emily tells her, well, this is pretty much the end of your kidhood. But it's Arthur tries to reassure her that it's not going to be that bad. It's going to be great, and reminds her of her past experiences in earlier episodes. In a way, it's kind of like if you've seen that Full House episode where the youngest sister turns 5 and they're showing like highlight clips of like scenes from past episodes.
This kind of thing definitely happens in real life, even later on in life, because usually what ends up happening is usually someone relatively young, will have a particular event happen, and then they'll declare, "Oh, I'm getting old," and then someone older than them, especially in an older generation, will look at them and basically say, "You have no idea."
Yeah.
If you're in your single digits, teens or 20s, whatever, and you say you're getting old, I would still say cherish the years you got, because you really don't know what that means yet.
But it ends up working out because DW kind of gets the wish that she makes on the birthday candles, and I don't want to spoil it, but it's pretty funny though.
Yeah, I don't remember offhand what the wish is, so I'll have to check out this episode afterwards and see what she wished for.
Yeah. And then the final slot begins with the story of Arthur and DW clean up, in which Arthur and DW basically work together to try to save time on cleaning up their rooms. But they can't seem to agree on how anything is organized.
Yeah, most people, especially some of the ones I know, when it comes to organizing a specific space or their rooms, they often will have a particular way they want things to be set up. So even when someone is supposedly helping them, they still kind of lead the charge most of the time because they want it to be a certain way. And these guys, of course, they don't get along, which I've seen in other shows. I think the Berenstain Bears had an episode like that. And I think the solution they ultimately come to is that they'll just work on their own rooms individually. Yeah. And the event that Arthur wants to go to, I think he catches the tail end of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it goes to show. You want something done right, do it yourself.
Yeah, a common message, but still very poignant.
Yeah. Yeah. And then the season concluded with the story of the long, dull winter. Which centers on Arthur and his friends realizing that it's been a long time since they've had a holiday, and so they attempt to invent one. I don't remember seeing this one, and so I don't know what ideas they kind of pitch around.
That one I can assist with, because I do remember this episode in some detail.
Yeah, sure.
So they decide to go to their own respective houses or whatever and come up with ideas and then bring them together to see whose idea makes the most sense to do. In terms of Buster, his was basically a version of Halloween where people come to his house in costumes and give him candy, and the only candy he gives back out is the stuff he can't find it himself to eat. Like if he's full and he can't eat anymore, he'll just pass it out to the kids.
Yeah, they get the leftovers.
Yep. Francine, I think it was just a day where people just sit around and do nothing. Or rather, they think about how, we're sitting here and we're bored, there's nothing to do. And she turns it into a song, but neither of those ideas end up working. While this is all going on, Arthur's sister kind of gets involved and says, hey, we should do Pony Day. He's like, absolutely not.
No.
And I kind of laugh because as he's leaving, she says it multiple times, each time slower, where she's like, Pony Day, Pony Day. And as he finally leaves, she goes, Pony Day.
Yep. Don't expect Arthur to get on board with this. He won't even let DW's baby doll play baseball with him, if you remember in the Copycat episode.
I kind of remember that.
Yeah.
We've been talking about a bunch of episodes, so I'll have to sit and think about that.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the holiday that ends up winning is hers. It gets put in the paper, and it becomes an unofficial holiday of the town. So Arthur is bummed about this, that none of their ideas worked, but then I think Binky comes up to him and says, well, now you have a whole year to think of one.
So, I guess you could credit Francine with the invention of the staycation. Kind of a joke, but...
In a way, yeah. I suppose so. I mean, the idea of a staycation has probably existed for a while, but I definitely didn't hear that specific word used for it too much before this episode.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So that's pretty much the complete third season. And please join us next time as we dive into season 4. And in the meantime, stream us on YouTube and YouTube Music, and comment, and ask your questions, and whatever you have to say.
Yeah, if you have favorite episodes that we've talked about, or even ones that we haven't talked about yet, we'd love to hear about that. If there are TV shows or movies you want us to discuss in the future, we'd love to hear your thoughts on those as well, and why you think we should talk about them. But as Seth basically said, any interaction is welcome.
All right. Well, until next time, see you guys.
So long, everyone.